Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and during our half-hour programs, I talk to writers and sometimes other brands of artists about their craft, what they're doing today, how they got there, what they might have planned for the future. We've had on, besides writers, sculptors, musicians, actors, all sorts of other artists. It's a pretty wide net. So if you have an idea for someone who might be right for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show and send in your suggestions. I also want to add that because we're in our 23rd year, Cape Ann TV is very proud of this series, but it's only one of many that come out of Cape Ann TV, produced, created, and broadcast right here in Cape Ann. We're very proud of that. And it's not a community service you can get by subscribing to Dish. So stick with cable and you'll stick with the community. We do have a writer tonight. Her name is Daisy Nell from Essex, nearby Essex, and she has come out with a new book titled Rocky at the Dockside, and we're going to be talking about that book and the musical CD that comes with it. Daisy Nell is a native of Essex. She's a folk singer and songwriter, as many of you know, with a long history of school, museum, and shipboard performances. She's performed throughout New England and as far away as Hawaii and Alaska with her husband Stan Collinson, Captain Stan, and their band Crabgrass. She has several CDs and a Parents' Choice Award winning children's album, Bought Me a Rooster. Her first children's book was The Stowaway Mouse, which you may remember from an earlier show, and that book, as the new book, was illustrated by George Ulrich. Welcome to the show, Daisy.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Glad to have you back with a new volume, and I want to hold this up to the camera right away so people can see the cover and remember the book a little more clearly. This is about a star named Rocky, who is a parrot.
Rocky the parrot.
Can you tell us about the book and where the idea came from?
Well, the story is a made-up story about a parrot named Rocky, who, in the story, Rocky had spent a lot of his youth on board a ship owned by a sea captain, and the sea captain has a chance to sail around the world, which he'd always wanted to do. So he gives Rocky to his grandchildren, who must have been raised by hippies because their names are Rainbow and Tree. And they live in a cottage at the edge of Gloucester Harbor. So Rocky moves in with the children, and they have a little time getting used to each other because Rocky's been raised on a ship where he's learned to talk like a sailor. So a few adventures take place within the story. It does involve a little escape through the dog door and down to Gloucester Harbor, where Rocky makes a visit to the schooner Ardell, and he and the captain have words, and a few feathers get ruffled in the process. But finally, the pecking order has been determined by the end of the story. But what I wanted to do in the story was tell a tale, a made-up story, and unlike my first book, it is not a song. It's not, the first book was the illustrated text of a song, a ballad. In this case, it's a story from start to finish, based on the fact that I did in fact own a parrot named Rocky back in the 80s. And Rocky was, as you say, a star. I used to do birthday parties. And I was teaching nursery school music, and Rocky would go with me on birthday party gigs, and he would, hang upside down from my finger and do tricks, and of course eat birthday cake and sing. And he was a real character. He could laugh and sing and whistle, and pant like a dog, and even bark like a dog. And
did he talk like a sailor?
He actually did not talk like a sailor. That was made up for the story. But he knew how to say, Rocky want a cracker, which is kind of an obvious thing for birds to say. And he would say, what a good boy. And some of those sayings I put into the story because, in fact, Rocky, he really was almost seemed human when he would laugh after he'd say, "Want a cracker?" And then you'd say, "Well, Rocky, you're a good boy." He'd say, "What a good boy." And then
he knew
and then,
exactly
yes,
what
and
it
he'd
said.
and he'd sort of bat his eyes, and then he'd laugh, and then he'd sing. I mean, he really did sing. He would sing arpeggios up the scale, and people would think that he was me. You know, if somebody else in the house was on the telephone, they'd say, "Oh, there's Daisy practicing in the background."
So he was imitating you.
Well,
practicing.
I might have been imitating. He might have been imitating somebody. I didn't. He did. He wasn't born at my house. He came to me as an adult, so maybe he lived with other singers. I
Other
don't
musicians.
know. I'm not sure what his early influences were, but he did not live on a ship.
So he had a big vocabulary. Did
He
did
had
say
quite a
Red
vocab-
Sox stink or anything?
No,
Did
he
you know
didn't say
phrases
anything like that. It's surprising what birds really do say, because actually, if birds said the thing that was said to them the most often, they'd probably say "shut up," because once they get chattering, you know, it's too much of a good thing. He did call out my children's names as if they couldn't tell if that was me or Rocky. So after their
Really?
name, yes. Oh, it was very
That precise?
Oh yeah. Well, as we talk, we'll hear more about how I could capture Rocky's voice on tape, and people would swear that it was really a human and not in fact a parrot.
Can you pick a passage or two, a page or two from Rocky at the Dockside, and to read it to give us a sense
Sure.
of the tone?
And,
and
I
the-
should
and the
say
plot?
these drawings make the story come alive, just as they did with my first book. George Ulrich from Marblehead has really brought this story alive.
That's a good point. I
Every
wanna make
single
sure
drawing is
that
great.
George Ulrich, who is the illustrator, gets plenty of credit here, because these are very beautiful, very colorful pictures, and they do bring the story alive.
Yeah, Rocky, in this story, as I said, is moved into this house, this cottage near Gloucester Harbor, and the children's names are Rainbow and Tree. And this is a drawing where Rainbow, the little girl, is coming in the morning, and she says, "Good morning, Rocky," said Rainbow, who was the first one up every day. She loved raising the quilt that covered Rocky's cage at night. He hopped onto Rainbow's arm and then climbed up to the perch on the upper deck of his cage. "Hi," said Rocky, singing it more than saying it. "Rocky, want a cracker?" he asked. Rainbow laughed. "Rocky, I'm supposed to ask you if you want a cracker. Now be a good boy. Can you say, 'Good boy'?" Rocky swaggered back and forth. Red boy," he said. Rainbow tried again. "That's almost right, Rocky. Say 'good boy,' not 'red buoy.' You're not on a ship anymore. Try it again." Rocky yawned. Rainbow's brother Tree came into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. "Ahoy! All hands on deck," said Rocky, sounding like a salty sailor. Rocky sang a little tune with his name. "Rocky!" Tree laughed and tried to sing along. Rocky sang right up the scale, "Ha ha ha ha," like an opera singer. He reached a note that was too high for his voice, so it came out sounding like someone was spitting out something that tasted terrible. "Ah ha ha ha!" And so on.
Very good. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this book comes with a musical CD with a song about Rocky that's not really close to the plot of the story, although it has to do with Rocky himself. I can't show the CD because it's in the control room. We're going to hear part of that. Can you explain something about Rocky the Parrot and when it was written, and clarify again that this is about Rocky but not the story of the book?
Right. Well, the genesis of that is that when I finished my first book, it seems as though it was barely announced that I had a book, and if people read it very nicely, I got feedback, followed by your next book should be about, and everybody had an idea about what my next book should be. And, I took that to heart, knowing that it would be a while before I could actually write another story. But my son came to me and he said, you should do a story about Rocky. And I thought, oh, Rocky the Parrot. Well, he said, you already have the song, thinking the first book had a CD inside of it with a song on it. The second book should have a CD inside with a song on it. And I thought, oh, the Rocky song. And this was something that I had written and recorded back in 1982. And it used to be something that I would take as almost like a party favor to kids' birthday parties. There would be, I would go to the birthday party with Rocky, and I'd give them a copy of this record that I made. And I recorded it partly in a studio and partly at home, because it was about Rocky and, what it was like having a parrot in the house. And Rocky himself was singing and talking and whistling and making his funny starting a car noise in between the verses. So I recorded that at home, and the engineer back then in 1982, this is reel to reel, and it was a vinyl record, and but we managed to get Rocky on the record. Well, my kids were then aged 12 and 9, and they sang on the chorus. Well, before I took this idea any farther this year, I went back and I found a copy of the record, found a record player to play it on, and I thought, the song holds up, it's all right. And my daughter listened to it, and she is, both of my kids are very critical of anything to do with music, but my daughter is a great musician and a great singer, and Miranda Russell. And she said, you might want to re-record it. There are some pops and clicks in there, and maybe just, update the words a little bit. And so I thought, well, I don't have you guys. This would, you're singing on this album. This is a great opportunity. You could be in my next book. And they said, that's okay. That's okay. So I thought, all right, I'll re-record it with Stan, and I'll find some kids, her kids. So I recorded it last winter with my grandchildren, singing the part that my kids sang 30 years ago.
Good.
So that was a wonderful experience.
It's good to clean up that technology too.
Oh, well,
30 years old, the world has changed.
Oh, it's so much. And also the engineer, Eric Kilburn at Wellspring Studio in Acton, he was able to lift all of Rocky's singing and talking and whistling and put it into the new recording. So it was fascinating to see how that could be done, because the technology is amazing.
That's a great intro. We're going to now have a sample, not the whole CD, but a sample of Rocky the Parrot as sung and composed by Daisy, Nell, and Stan.
Rocky the Parrot, he's a happy fellow. Give him a peanut and he'll say hello. His body is green and his head is yellow. Up on his perch he's rocking to and fro. Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Hey Rocky, what do you say? Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Rock me Rocky all through the day. Rockin' and talking with my friend Rocky. Sing with the music on the radio. He can cry like a baby, he can laugh and whistle. When he hears the phone he always says hello. Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Hey Rocky, what do you say? Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Rock me Rocky all through the day. Rockin' and talking with my friend Rocky. Sounds like a sailor on the ocean blue, looking out the window.
Good, that was fun. The viewers can listen to the whole CD when they buy the book, which is very reasonably priced. Tell us where the book's available, Daisy.
Well, right here in Gloucester, it's available at the bookstore of Gloucester and at Maritime Gloucester, which a lot of people still think of it as the Gloucester Maritime Heritage Center, but their new name, Maritime Gloucester, which is where the Ardell is tied up. And the Ardell plays a role in this story, just like in my last book.
That was the main place where the mouse stowed away.
That's right, that's right. And so now the poor captain is beleaguered by yet another creature in the form of Rocky. And so that store, the gift shop there, has Rocky at the dockside.
One question that occurred to me when I read the book was that it wasn't set in Essex. You're from Essex. The Ardell was built in Essex. Was Essex ever in the plan?
Well, in the first book, when the mouse stowed away, that was the day that the schooner Ardell was launched in Essex. So with Ardell now here in Gloucester, the story had to move to Gloucester. So in this case, I had to set it in Gloucester so that when Rocky in the story flies down to Gloucester Harbor and lands on the schooner Ardell, he doesn't have as far to fly.
So you were easy on Rocky.
I was easy on
And I want to mention also, you said before the show, Rocky is still alive.
Rocky's retired, living in Florida.
And he's how old did you say? About? Give or take a decade?
I mean, he must be in his 50s. I don't know if he's collecting Social Security, but he's probably well into his 50s.
Does he write? Does he miss you?
He does not write. I don't know. Maybe there's some old issues that were never resolved.
I want to ask you, because many of our viewers often ask about the process of creating a book. You got the idea and it was suggested by your son. How long did it take to write and then re-record and work with the technical aspects of saving Rocky's voice?
Well,
and tell us about the process.
That was the easiest part. At first, I didn't put it together with the first book as having anything to do with it. I thought as a completely isolated project, I would write a story about Rocky. And I sat down and started to write a story about Rocky, or something that really happened, as if it were me telling the story about something that happened to Rocky in our family life back in the 80s. And I thought, this may or may not be interesting. To maybe some people it would be, but I thought, let's throw that whole thing out and just write a story from start to finish that was, not really my house, not really my kids, but something that could have happened. So then I, as it were, took the gloves off and just had a really good time writing the story. And, as you well know, there's editing and rewriting. And lots of.
I want to emphasize that for
yes,
students.
Yes.
You don't. It doesn't happen like that.
Oh no, you can't. I can't describe how many times I rewrote it, and shortened it. The old throwing out the first paragraph and the last paragraph and about half of what's in the middle, to boil it down and take out what's not germane to the story. So I did go through that for probably a couple of months. And then it was time to go to the studio and re-record the record. That was a day. That was nothing.
So how long was the process from the idea to print?
Probably 4 months. I worked with the same printing company in Winnipeg, Canada, where I did my first book. They were so easy to work with. And so once they had it in their hands, it was just a matter of probably a month. But working with George Ulrich, now, he's a professional children's book illustrator. So this to him was, get me the text as soon as you can and I'll start sending you drawings. And that's the magic. That's the real magic. I mean, once I put the story to bed, I thought, okay, I can just enjoy the process from here on out. And he said, how many drawings do you think it'll take? And I said, well, you're the expert. How many ideas can you fit into one picture? And that's always just so miraculous to me to see how much of a story a picture can tell. And we should get him on the show one of these days. Oh, it's so interesting to see what he did with this. And the more I looked at each drawing that came to me in the form of he did one or two in color. He sent me a bunch of thumbnails, and there was very little back and forth. I mean, at one point, I think the only thing I ever changed was that I thought maybe the captain had aged too much since the last story. And I said to him, George, running the schooner Ardell is probably a tough thing, but I don't think he aged quite that much. So he took a little bit of facial hair off of the drawings he submitted.
As we're talking about the drawings of George Ulrich, the illustrator,
They're great.
I'll hold up another picture. This is, these are rainbow and tree on the schooner.
Yeah, they're leaving the Ardell.
And very, very lively, very colorful, very bright pictures that kind of jump off the page.
Yeah, each picture is framed in a little border that, if you put them all together, it would almost look like a quilt. It's really beautifully done. And
Here's a smaller illustration of
yeah.
very, very happy parrot. Looks like he's just going to town there.
That's Rocky. Now, all the people who knew the real Rocky back then, and there are quite a few people on Cape Ann that remember Rocky, and you know who you are. If you're watching this, you'll say, oh boy, and they'll tell you their Rocky stories. He had quite a following.
And now it'll be bigger.
Well, now this is
Have to get him back.
Well, this is a way to introduce a character. And how animals sometimes just have such a personality. There's a whole new generation that can hear Rocky stories, the old ones and the new ones. I mean, the reception of the book so far has been such that kids will now tell me that they feel as though they know Rocky. And so that was important. In fact, the editor I was working with, Lisa Markowski from Newburyport, one of her early comments was, make sure that Rocky has enough of a personality in the story. Don't lose that as you're writing it. And it's the kind of thing that you never think of, but you need an objective person to tell you, what's that doing in the story, or why isn't there more of this in the story? And you hone that after a while. You start to look for it yourself once you've done it a few times. And as a songwriter, I've had to do that for years. But it's marvelous when you can open up to the criticism and actually hear it rather than taking it personally.
I just got the 5-minute signal from Kate. I want to ask you one final question. We're in the late fall now. What are you doing in writing or projecting in writing, and what are you doing musically?
Well, I'm promoting the
in 2 minutes or less.
No, I'm promoting the book wherever I have a musical gig. I take the book, sing the song, sing the Stowaway Mouse. Once you have an audience, as you know, and when you're a writer, you can have written the best book in the world, but if no one knows about it, how are they going to find out about it? And this is independently done. It's not Simon & Schuster or anything. It's just me. And so having an audience, I have a few musical gigs that come up here in the fall, a lot of local things, Russell Orchards in particular. We play there quite a bit in the fall over in Ipswich. And
sure, give it a plug. Russell Orchards.
Russell Orchards.
I think you have a relative involved there.
I do, yes. Know them well.
Miranda's there.
Yes, and
I got the 3-minute signal.
And lots of my family over there actually helping in every way they can. And so that's part of what we'll be doing this fall with the book and with writing. You never know when the inspiration's going to come. You could be in the shower, or you could be.
You're ready. You're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm always ready to record it.
I got the 3-minute signal about a minute ago, so I'm going to have to begin to close up.
There we go.
Daisy, Nell, I want to thank you very much for coming down to the Writer's Block again and
thank
telling
you.
us about Rocky at the Dockside. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. This is my favorite show on cable. I love it.
I love it. I love it.
It's great.
Thank you for being with us, too, out there in cable land. If you've learned something about Daisy Nell's background, her writing of Rocky at the Dockside and the song, Rocky the Parrot, then the Writer's Block has done its job tonight. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.
Rocky the parrot, he's a happy fellow. Give him a peanut and he'll say hello. His body is green and his head is yellow. Up in his perch he's rocking to and fro. Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Hey Rocky, what do you say? Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Rock me Rocky all through the day. Rockin' and talking with my friend Rocky. Sing with the music on the radio. He can cry like a baby, he can laugh and whistle. When he hears the phone, he always says hello. Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Hey Rocky, what do you say? Hey Rocky, rock me Rocky. Rock me Rocky all through the day. Rockin' and talking with my friend Rocky. Sounds like a sailor on the ocean blue.